Okay, what's going on?
Hey everybody.
Hey, everybody. We're hanging out. It's Friday. It's chill. It's a chill Friday.
Good
And we're,
vibes.
yeah, good vibes, chill. I'm not going to antagonize Taylor at all today. I'm going to let you guys do it.
I feel like that might even be worse, but we'll see.
I'm going to let I'm gonna let you guys do it,
Go easy on me.
and talk about some of the stuff that's out there that people are talking about regarding the Patriots. In addition to all of your questions, which really can be wide ranging and whatever you want, we've had people submit some questions to Taylor already. So if you do have some, we're gonna rip through some of our stuff now that we have already kind of loaded up from some of Taylor's followers and other places we've gotten them, and then we will get to yours here on the chat as well. We'll start with a little bit of kind of like newsy sort of stuff that's just kind of keeping you up to date with what we've got. But first up, do need to remind you, please check out our exclusive wagering partner. We're now 2 weeks old with FanDuel, the number one, America's number one sports book, and it's number one for a reason. And you should check it out if you're interested in getting in on any of this action and you live in Massachusetts. Go to fanduel.com/Boston and sign up for this special offer. 200 in bonus bets when you place your first $5 bet. So check that out whenever you would like to. Once, like I said, we're doing Q&A stuff, but I want to talk about a few things that kind of went on in the Patriots world right now as we kind of warm up and fill up the room. We'll start with the lowest significant thing, which was Nelson Aguilar signed, and that's incorrect. He signed with the Baltimore Ravens, correct?
Yes,
Yeah.
Ravens.
It's with the Baltimore Ravens. So we'll fix that, but we'll still talk about it. Signed with the Baltimore Ravens, and he is gone, and that's
Mhm,
not a surprise. And we're not here to shovel any dirt on the man
mhm.
and talk about why he failed, but he did fail here in New England, and it was tough. So I guess is anything to do with that what happened with Aguilar Patriot centric, or did they buy kind of did they get a lemon? You know, like can he be productive? We saw a little bit of productivity the year before he got to New England,
Yeah.
but that's about it.
So it was an interesting situation. So they signed him coming off a really great year with the Raiders, sincerely. Like I was watching the tape and he was making big plays downfield against some of the better corners in the league. So I was excited about the signing at the time, thought that they were buying high on a guy who was, or buying relatively low on a guy who could have had, low end wide receiver one, like high end wide receiver two status. But that's kind of been the story his whole career. And then we saw why. One, I think the first year with the Patriots, because he was miscast as an X, that is what he played for the Raiders. But they also used a lot of tighter formations where he wasn't really an X. He was more, still had the two-way go. So by alignment, he was still more of like a Z slot receiver type. But yeah, when he was outside for them in his first season, he really just ran like curls and go routes. They
That's
didn't use
it.
him they didn't use him over the middle a
Just
lot.
clear it out. Take a
This
defender with you.
Right. And he's not the biggest guy like a Devontae Parker where he can go above the rim on some of those deep balls. And Mac was just really, it seemed like he was trying to let him run under passes a lot and it just didn't work. They didn't have great chemistry there. So then in year two, I was thinking, okay, now that they have Devontae Parker, it frees up Aguilar to play in the slot, Z in his primary role. And early on, he had a lot of success and he actually looked really good, but you just kept seeing inconsistencies. Like there were drops, there were just some really bad moments. Obviously, great ones like the touchdown against the Steelers, that was incredible, but he just couldn't put it together to the point where the team could trust him consistently. He had some really bad fumbles, and I think a couple of comeback attempts that they had that really kind of screwed him. Again, like I'm not trying to dump on the guy. This is just the case of what happened when he was on the Pats and why it didn't work
It's
out.
not mean. It just is. It
Right,
just
right,
is. You know, there's
yeah,
nothing. It just happened that way. I think the Patriots gave him a lot of money. I mean,
hmm
relative to kind of what was going on with the free agent class that year, there weren't a lot of great players, but they targeted him early. There were other people out there, Curtis Samuel, Corey Davis. Again, neither of whom really popped for their teams.
yeah.
Samuel turned into a gadget guy over with Washington, and Davis was okay when he wasn't hurt, but really not an impact guy, and was really supplanted or very quickly by other receivers on that team. So
hmm
there wasn't, but it's again, it has to go back to the the misfire, I guess,
hmm
of identifying people early and missing.
yeah.
That's what is the most perplexing thing to me about both the Aguilar and John O. Smith signings. uh, you got guys who had a particular skill set, and then you used them to do stuff that they weren't particularly good at and didn't really have a plan for them. And it was really, really, really bizarre to see that from Belichick, who normally can look at a player and say, "Oh man, they're not using him right. If we get that guy over here, we can unlock a lot," because he's done that a million times before. And I think that's what people were excited about with these types of signings. It's like, oh, he must see another level where Aguilar can get to, and it went backwards, and with him and Jonnu, which I'm still so stunned by that misfire by the Patriots.
I think the Jonnu situation was a bit different because Jonnu, I think they did use him the way he should have been used. Like if you look at his targets, it's a lot of screens. It's like trying to slide routes and things like that. The issue was he couldn't justify being on the field because the production wasn't there. Like again, you're Belichick signing you for future production. So they were both coming off really big years, and you thought, okay, they should just build on them in our system. Jonnu wasn't consistent enough to be on the field. And I think Aguilar, he was on the field a lot, but it seemed more like, I don't know, maybe just he wasn't doing a great job in practices or behind the scenes just because he didn't get as many opportunities as I thought he maybe could have, especially with the team just feeding Jacoby, and he was the consistent piece. And it seemed like Aguilar was phased out at times, just wasn't a big part of plans when I thought he was going to take over. And again, the on-field consistency is a part of that as well. So, Jonnu was more just, he didn't pan out. Aguilar was a little bit of everything where the Patriots may not have put him in great position all the time. He looked good when they did, but at the same time, he didn't really give you what he showed he could as a Raider. So, that's a little more on both sides there.
Yeah, it definitely is. Aguilar gone. I don't think the Patriots ever looked his way, and not super surprising. But whatever it was that Aguilar did bring here, and again, it was very limited. Who's doing that now?
So I think that's probably where Taekwon Thornton comes into play.
Exactly, and you saw him take some snaps from Aguilar late in the year, and that's when we talked about earlier in the week. Didn't do as much with them as you would have hoped, but it seems
neither did Aguilar, to be fair. So,
exactly, and it very much could have been schematic as much as anything else. But you wonder, is that the type of role they're going to put him in? Is he better suited for it?
Yeah, so the X stuff I think is going to stay Devontae Parker's role. I think when he ends up getting hurt, that's where I think they have a bit of a question mark. I think maybe Taekwon ends up being the X. I don't really love him there. I know he's trying to bulk up, but I like him more off the ball as someone they can move around and give him easier matchups. But in that role that they were using Aguilar in, where he was more of the off-ball guy outside, or they bump him in the slot if they wanted him to run crossing routes, that's where I think you're going to see like Taekwon Thornton takes over a lot of that production. And Aguilar slid into Jacoby Myers' role a lot when Myers was hurt. So you kind of see they tried to put him in that star role in it for a few weeks, really like when Zappy was playing, but he just couldn't really seize the opportunity. So we'll see if Thornton can do it this season.
Yeah, no doubt. And I think Thornton is now, I think people would have been fine letting Thornton, if he didn't get hurt last year, taking his lumps and just taking all of the snaps and just wait till Aguilar went elsewhere this year, and it really wouldn't have mattered because you didn't get a ton out of that. So he's gone. That's not surprising. Certainly a disappointing signing here. Another report, and again, take it with a grain of salt. It's just more of the back and forth that we're talking about regarding DeAndre Hopkins. Jeff Howe of The Athletic reports today, just in a piece talking about receivers in general, how the entire receiver market has been pretty cool because evaluators just really haven't been high on anybody out there. And that includes, of course, Juju and Myers as well, who, were near the top of the list there. But you're talking about Hopkins, who has has his own team. Obviously an offensive breakout, but the report now is that the really no teams value him where the Cardinals assume he's going to, the type of compensation he's going to get. They think Arizona is in it just strictly for a salary dump. And when you're looking at dump salary, you're basically just like, give me anything. If it's keep him or cut him, you really don't have much leverage. And if that's the boat Hopkins is in, forget third. You're now into fifth and whatever sort of compensation.
It's a very similar situation to Brandon Cooks. And Brandon Cooks gives you more, I think, big playability. And he went for a fifth in this draft and then a sixth. Is it a conditional or is it a straight up sixth? I'm not even sure. But basically,
it was a fifth and a sixth. Yeah, exactly. But you saw where that went. And Cooks being a little bit younger, not having the production of Hopkins, but it's basically I don't want this guy anymore. So give me whatever, because I just don't want to pay him.
Yeah,
That's
and they're both. I mean, both of these receivers are guys where I think the Bills would be a great fit for Hopkins because he doesn't have to be the guy. But I think if he's your number two, it's like, oh, okay, now we're gonna go with gas. Like then he legitimately is scarier. But if you're talking about him as the guy that changes your offense, I don't love him in that role right now. Again, he had a down year because he missed the 6 games due to the suspension. Then Kyler Murray got hurt. So obviously he wasn't going to have a great year. I also don't love how the Cardinals use him. Like, I feel like anytime Hopkins has played the Patriots for some reason, all he does is run out routes. So I feel like my perception of him is very different because he's never played the Patriots and been a huge threat. Now, granted, there are also times where I mentioned this on my Twitter, like Belichick, anytime they were in the red zone and played man coverage, they bracketed him every time. So there's also, occasions where they're just really using him or trying to get him out of the picture because there's so much extra attention on him. But in terms of the Patriots, I've been pretty clear about it. Like, it would be nice if they got him for cheap, but I just don't think he does enough or what you really need on offense to be that difference maker. I mean, but again, he's also a very good player. I think personally, I'm just down on him because of last season.
It's funny. What cracks me up is his 17 game averages last year would have been like, 105, 13, 50,
Yep.
and 6, like, or whatever it was. He didn't score a ton of touchdowns, but that's definitely nothing to sneeze at. It is interesting.
Yeah.
I feel like the DeAndre Hopkins conversation has gotten too far. It began with, oh my God, big eyes. It's a name. Get him at all costs. And now it's gone to, I don't even know if I want him for a fifth.
Because now people are seeing what these receivers are fetching and the fact that no one's interested. So now you're not as excited when, DeAndre Hopkins is on the board for 2-3 weeks.
I know. I do think it's gone too far to the other side, which is what, surprises me here. The other thing that happened today that is of interest, and again, this is the kind of thing that once T. Kyles gets his butt out to Boston,
we're trying.
He will be able to do in person is some Zay Flowers action at BC Media Day, and again, guys running routes in shorts and not anything. There's how much can you learn? I still think no matter what, anytime you watch this guy do anything, you're just kind of impressed. Are you not?
Absolutely. And even like now, we're showing it now, even when it's just him running on air, you still see the speed, the explosiveness, what a dynamic athlete he is. So, I mean, yeah, I'm also not a huge fan of just watching what guys do in shorts and a t-shirt because it doesn't necessarily translate. But you see what he can do on the actual tape in a live action. Like, he's fantastic. He plays bigger than his size. I'm telling you, if this guy were 6 feet tall, he'd be the easy consensus number one, and I don't think he'd be particularly close. I think if you were talking about him in the class of guys like Jamar Chase, maybe not. But if you're talking about, like, especially Jackson Smith and Jigba, I think he's a good player, but I don't really think they're that close. I think they can both be productive receivers for you, but I think Flowers gives you a level of explosiveness that no one else in this class does, on top of being able to play above the rim in a way that, a lot of these guys can't. There's mostly smaller guys in this draft class also, so he's kind of more in that mold. JSN is one of the bigger guys, but he's also really more of a slot because he's not small, but he's more on the thin side than what you'd want at X, although I think he can play in different places. But yeah, man, Zay, everybody knows I'm a huge Zay fan. I hope they pick him. Also, everybody has been telling me that 14 may be too rich for their blood. Reports are coming out that people don't think he's going to make it out of the top 20 and that he's wide receiver 1. All it takes is one team to really, really like him and be like, all right, what? I can't move up 3 spots, whatever. I'm taking him. It's that close. So
I said this earlier, Taylor, and I don't know if you agreed or not, but I really think the mocks are always wrong nowadays when they're looking at receivers. It's not a great class, but it's still the position that you get value of drafting high, which makes them more valuable than maybe they are on a big board, so to speak, because you can have, a safety or an inside linebacker on your big board as the 20th best player and a receiver as your 30th, but
value.
It's the value of that, getting that guy in your building, controlling them for 4 or 5 years and being able to get potential wide receiver 1 production without having to go spend 20-something million in free agency or trade a lot of draft capital to go acquire. Every team wants them. Every team now needs them. The conversation has changed. It used to be, oh, you don't need a big diva wide receiver to go win with. And now it's like, well, maybe if you're Pat Mahomes, you don't. But most guys do, and most teams do. And it has such tremendous value to go get one. So I do think that, yeah, maybe there's not a run in the first top 10, but I think when the first goes at 10, 11, 12, 5 are going to go in the next 7 picks, and there's that receiver run, and then there'll be a couple more late. And don't be stunned if like a mock right now has 3 receivers taken in the first round and it's closer to like 6 because they're going to go. And if you've got let's say you've got 1, 2 guys lined up, then people are going to start jumping over each other, jumping up to trade. So it's going to happen. I don't think it's crazy. The other thing I've never understood is this concept of value. If you get a star player that was projected to go 25 and you got him at 14, does it really matter?
That's, or I'm there.
Or if you totally bust at 15, by taking a guy who fell to you and should have been higher, but at the time it seemed like value, but it also doesn't matter. Like a player is a player is a player. I understand Belichick's philosophy behind, I don't care where I ranked him. That's the guy I like. Where I get annoyed with the process is you do have to be able to understand the board enough to know that you might have been able to get somebody a round or 2 later. But when you're talking about 14 or 22, there's no difference in that. There's none.
Absolutely. I mean, and we see
if you knew he was going 22 and you could trade back, still get him and get some capital, that's different. But if you don't know and you love a guy and you're like, oh, it's just a hair early, I'd feel better about taking him at 18 or 20, that's stupid. Like, just take them if you like them. If you like them, it doesn't matter.
I agree, and we see every single year. Like, obviously, the Patriots don't knock out of the park every draft, but they very rarely leave the draft without at least a couple very good value picks. So these always even out. Where the Patriots choose someone in the first 2 rounds, like Daron Harmon, there's Jordan Richards, and then there's Daron Harmons. They work and they don't. Where everyone's like, I don't even know who this guy is.
Taekwon Wilson was another run to your program sort of player,
right. And then they know more than we do. So a lot of the time they have word and know where teams actually have these players ranked because they talk to people and they understand how it works in ways that we don't because they have more connections. So sometimes someone that, like you said, where a mock draft will have him as a 2nd round pick, like a Cole Strange. Even the Rams, they had the whole joke, but they were like, no, legitimately, we didn't think that he was going to make it out of the first round. We don't really blame the Patriots for picking him. We just literally didn't plan on being available to get him because they didn't have a pick in the first round. So these things always even themselves out because, first or 2nd round, you may not like the value. Then they're going to get 2 or 3 players in the 3rd and 4th round where they get great value because a certain position was pushed back because there was a run on a different position. Like if there's a huge run on tackles and receivers, there's some really good, maybe 1st round type cornerbacks that are going to end up going on the 2nd day of the draft. So at some point, all these things start to even out. That's why I'm saying, hey, if you like a guy early and you're like, yes, he is someone that we project to be a potential Pro Bowler, they're pretty good at finding those guys, to be fair. So I really don't care when it comes to like, oh, they reached for this guy like, 10 picks. I don't mind because, again, we don't even know if another team was going to snag that person.
You don't know, and that's the whole thing. Relative to projections, if it's close, get them. That's exactly what I don't get. Like if that's the guy and that's the guy, get him. So I agree. If they're all in, great, fine. I don't care if it's viewed as a slight reach. Doesn't matter if you get a good player. It really doesn't matter at all.
And he changes your offense legitimately. As much as I like Darnell Wright, he's one of if it's like Paris Johnson, Peter Skoronski, or Darnell Wright, those are the only tackles where if they chose those guys before Zay Flowers, I'm like, okay. Because it at least brings a level of stability to your offense that you wouldn't have otherwise. And it makes you better just on that where you're like, I don't have to worry about protection. It makes your life a lot easier. But other than that, Zay Flowers is the guy who really supercharges and makes your offense that top 10 conversation level offense. So
and somebody put Steve Smith was on NFL Network, I believe. Somebody put a side-by-side with Smith and Flowers' tail of the tape, and their measurables are very, very, very similar. With Flowers actually slight edge in speed and a slight edge in a couple other categories, but in the same ballpark. And the question that Steve Smith was asked was like, but does he have as much dog in him as you did? And Steve Smith said no. He's got
he said no. There we go.
He's got more. And everyone was like, whoa, because if you're going to say one thing about Steve Smith, it's like that's one of the toughest humans to ever play
when I worked at
football.
NFL Network, I met him in person. He is like his entire aura. He's a scary dude. Like you feel the intensity when he's in the room. So for him to say that about Zay Flowers, and again, when you watch the interviews of Zay Flowers, he's not really that Steve Smith presence where it's already kind of intimidating, but you can tell what a professional he is and how much it means to him. And then when he puts the pads on, that's when you see it. Like, what are the comps that he's getting? It's Tyler Lockett, who isn't really that, you don't think dog necessarily when you think Tyler Lockett, but he's someone who plays bigger than he is. Then you get the AB and the Steve Smith comparisons because he's got that dog. And it's like, all right, yeah, the guy's 5'9", but he's going to outjump my 6-foot corners. So, it doesn't really matter that he's one of the smaller guys. He's at least going to be competitive for the balls downfield. I know there was in this pro day, he ran a corner post, which he said was his favorite route.
Yeah.
He is so smooth. He does a great job. He'll consistently get into the defender's blind spot. So what that means is a defender is usually looking at the quarterback if they're in zone coverage, trying to read where the ball's going. Good receivers will get behind them so they don't know where they are. And then sometimes corners will panic. They'll either turn to get eyes on the guy or they'll just have a good feel for space and keep reading the quarterback and play the ball. But in either one of those situations, Zay's either embarrassing guys and literally having them spin around like 30, 40 yards downfield, or they have eyes on the ball. And there was one, like my favorite catch he's made in college, where there's two guys in the area. He goes
that
up
one's
against
just
both of them.
stupid, right?
It's insane.
You've seen it 100 times. It's the safety's trying to get back on him, and he's literally, you can't even see Flowers anymore because there's two guys on him. Yep. He ran past the corner, and then there's the safety, and the ball somehow he just sneaks in and grabs it between the two and walks into the end zone. Being able to catch it, but not stumbling and fumbling all over yourself, that many people around. I mean, that's like the signature play that people are like, oh, yep. A comp I don't see often, and I don't know if you will agree with it. Any Odell Beckham in him? Because you've seen Antonio, and you've seen, I just remember Odell running some of those kind of post corner sort of things and just losing people with that quick twitch gone sort of thing. So again, not as fast, not necessarily as explosive, but that.
Because Odell just as an athlete is like literally it's only him. There's no one you compare to Odell. He was long, massive hands, fast, crazy catch radius. But Zay, I can say, especially after the catch, is where I could say, okay, I see the Odell, because they both had that creativity where there's so many times, and whether it's downfield or after the catch, you watch him, and it's just the times you're watching the tape and maybe you're lulled because it's been a few plays. It's like it's BC, so not a lot of crazy stuff's happening. And then out of nowhere, he'll just pull some crazy play where you're like, oh, right, okay, you should be in the NFL. These people are not on your level. I could make this entire show about Zay Flowers. I don't know if we want to move on, but I'm already getting myself all worked up.
No, I get it, and it's so we'll talk more about him as we start to talk about some draft related stuff. But I mean, this is the next thing. I mean, we're gonna sit here and we're gonna like spin our wheels day after day talking about receivers. We're not even sure the Patriots necessarily want or need, but you do know that there's possibilities there in the draft. You want. I wouldn't say we differed. I think we both agree one more playmaker is essential. And you just got to find a way to find it. So when you see Flowers, they sent two guys today to Chestnut Hill to check it out. There were a lot of other scouts there as well. You do wonder what kind of interest is there. You have the Senior Bowl connection as well, where they coached him and they had a lot of people there. And this is the kind of guy where I could see the Patriots potentially falling in love with someone like this and being like, yeah. But you really don't know, so it's hard to say. I'm also biased. I like watching Boston college football. I've been there. I've seen them. And so, I like the hometown sort of angle and story as well. So we're going to start taking your questions. But let's tell you again briefly about our sponsor, FanDuel. As you know, a couple of weeks now, and in sports betting has been here now in Massachusetts. CLNS Media has partnered with FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. New customers here in Mass get in on the action. $200 bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. Just sign up at FanDuel.com/Boston and bet on all your favorite sports and more. And again, point spreads, who the Pats are going to draft, player props, all of that's in there. And you can have a lot of fun with that sort of stuff. Even here in a football offseason, but obviously tons of other things you can get in on, hockey, basketball, the tournament right now going on. So check it out. Super easy to use app, very safe, very secure. Don't miss your chance. As I said, $200 in bonus bets, win or lose when you make your first $5 wager. FanDuel.com/Boston. Make every moment more on America's #1 sportsbook. Do have to tell you, you got to be 21 or older, but you know that. Present in Massachusetts to take part in this particular deal, or at least present in a state where sports betting is legal. First online money wager needs to be $5 after a $10 deposit, and then you get your 200 bonus bucks issued as non-withdrawable bonus bets, expire in 14 days. Restrictions do apply. See terms at sportsbook.fanduel.com. Gambling problem, hope, and help is here. Gamblinghelplinema.org or call 800-327-5050 for 24/7 support. Let's get into some of the Q&A stuff here. And again, I know Taylor was happy. Don't submit him now. I won't see him yet. Submit them a little bit later on right now. But Taylor took in some questions. Like I said, I'm sure he's happy to be asked stuff by someone other than me. And that's fine. I'm just going to go in order that I have them loaded here. We're going to put up number one. This is from Siggy Moreno. Taylor, how will the Patriots compete against the three division rivals who have arguably upgraded your weapons? I swear I didn't pick this one because I asked you it yesterday. But this is something we talked about. Not only upgraded, just already superior weaponry within the division. And if Rodgers presumably does go to the Jets, even though he's on the decline and we don't think that he's going to have that many productive years left, it's hard to argue that the Patriots aren't just trailing them in weapons, but also probably in the quarterback position. So how are you keeping up with these guys?
Right. So so the way I kind of thought of this question, because I feel like we've talked about like, oh, weapons versus non, I was thinking of actually addressing the players and what's making these teams so much better. So obviously Aaron Rodgers, start there. It's nice that the Patriots played him as early as last year, so we know what they at least look like going toe to toe against him. Now the Patriots actually held in pretty well last season. I think their lack of size definitely showed up against Allen Lazard a few times, and Romeo Doubs. There were just some plays where they were bigger than the guy covered them. Like there was a touchdown against John Jones. Allen Lazard had a couple big fade catches, I believe. So next season, I think if they do end up getting that guy with size who can match up with Lazard, I think it helps you a lot. But Rodgers, they did a really good job, I think, just making sure it was also partially the scheme, but taking away a lot of the shots as much as they could until there were those one-on-one situations. We did see there was one great touchdown he had where they were playing cover two, and Rodgers just showed great vision and threw it right down the seam between Duggar and McCourty. It was almost an indefensible play. So I think one major component of this offseason that they still need to address, like we talked about, is that corner with the size and the length, not just to be able to take away that, those big boy plays, but also so they can get back to that matchup style defense they like to play. Whereas last year, it was a lot of, sticking to one side of the field with Bryant stuck in the slot, unless there was a certain situation where they had a man-to-man matchup they really wanted. But whereas what they used to do is they'd have someone like Gilmore or Keep Talib. They'd follow the number one or the big receiver everywhere, and it didn't matter what the coverage was, which made it even harder for defenses to know what was happening. So when it comes to Rodgers, I think what they really need to make the difference there, I think the pass rush was fine. I think the linebacker discipline could also be better. The sneaky need for them, I think that weak side linebacker spot, especially if Duggar's going to play deep more this season. But if they can secure that big corner spot, boundary corner, that kind of guy, get back to matchup football, I think that gives you a much better shot against a guy like Rodgers, where you're saying, okay, Rodgers, you're not trying to beat him, you're trying to make everybody else beat you. You know what I'm saying? That's where you see a lot more man coverage game plans, things like that. So starting with Rodgers, again, if they can get back to matching up, playing more man coverage, and being able to make the quarterback's weapons win, then I think they have a much better shot. And obviously on offense, you need the firepower to be able to keep up with a guy like Rodgers, assuming he scores every possession. Right now, like we kind of touched on yesterday, the game plan is going to be similar to what it was with Zappy, where you're trying to run the ball, you're trying to kill clock. Like I think a lot of this was the fact they had backups in the game. But against the Packers, the Patriots were literally not snapping the ball most of the time until there was 10 seconds left on the play clock. They were very obviously trying to bleed as much time as they could to make the game shorter. I think that's still your strategy against a great quarterback like Rodgers. Just hold on to the ball. But at the same time, if you have someone like Zay Flowers who, can take the dump off and turn it into a big play, take the top off against a certain, you don't want to throw against Sauce, but their secondary is pretty good. But you can find those matchups in the slot against their linebackers, and then that's how you at least keep up and make it so that Rodgers isn't just going up and down the field on you.
Yeah, no doubt about it. but it's a lot of like if or can they or will they, and
Yeah,
there's
that's the offseason.
it's on paper right now it does look like a challenge in that division, no doubt. Speaking of weaponry, this is someone that I know we've talked about a bit, so let's put this one up here. Will Taekwon get snaps in the slot this season?
I think most of his time is going to be off the ball and outside. And it's also, they use so many different formations. Sometimes slot and Z are almost the exact same thing. But I think you're going to see it at times, certain packages that they want him around, like crossing routes from inside, those corner routes or drags, things like that. But again, I think we're mostly going to see him on the outside running, the deep ins, deep outs from some of their run personnel. And also, I think guys like Juju and Bourne are better in the slot just because I think they can do more with the ball in their hands. As I was just talking about the Jets, they're one of the hardest things the Patriots had trouble with against the Jets was the fact they play a lot of really soft zone coverage. So there was a lot of cover 4, cover 6, things where they're just daring you to throw underneath every play. And the Patriots were doing just that. They weren't really trying to throw downfield much against the Jets. And when they did, it didn't work. But even the underneath stuff, they didn't have the dynamic players who could make big plays out of nothing. And I think in a season like this, you want that to be more where someone like Juju, if you get another dynamic back, you really one of your yak guys sees more of their time in the slot. Whereas Thornton, I think, is more of your separator. You want him outside as a speed presence to be able to dictate coverages and also just to kind of get the attention away from the middle of the field, since that's philosophically where the Patriots like to attack most. But yeah, a little bit of slot use, not a ton though. I'd say maybe like 30% he'll be in the slot.
Okay, so there's that. We're going to continue on with the offense here. We're going to take a question from Raul Alex Ramirez. Are the RBs on the roster capable of being used to the same capacity as James White was when he was motioned out?
Right. So one thing I just want to clarify is that it's not super, super common for a running back to be flexed out and not just run like a hitch.
Taylor, I'm still here. Don't freak. You're going full screen for 30 seconds, buddy. Okay?
Oh, okay, I get to see
Don't
it
worry.
all
I'm still here. I'm still here.
All right. Hello. All right, so what was I talking about? James White when he split out. So I think James Robinson has a little bit of experience doing that. You saw with the Jacksonville Jaguars. I think he had a slant and maybe a hitch route on the outside. So not extensive experience running routes from out wide like that. But there is a chance that Belichick brought him in to be less of a Damian Harris replacement and more of a type of Rex Burkhead role where he is a legitimate running back and you do use him in a lot of those packages. But he gives you genuine flexibility where a team doesn't know whether or not he's a runner or a receiver. Like what we saw in the Super Bowl when they came out in, I think it was a 3 tight end grouping with Rex Burkhead and Julian Edelman against the Rams. And they just literally spread out every single time because they were on the sideline trying to figure out how do we get the Rams at base defense because we cannot pass on their corners. It's not working. So I think James Robinson may be able to give you that flexibility, although that is a bit of a projection. Ty Montgomery, obviously a converted receiver, so he can run any route that you really want him to in that running back mold. But obviously he's coming off an injury where he missed almost all of last season, so you can't rely on him. Although if he's healthy and can get back to the shape that he was in, I think he'd be a solid person in that role. And then obviously Ramondre Stevenson, we saw him take a lot of the receiving back duties. He's just not a great separator because he's a bigger back. And although he's exceptionally elusive and all those things like that, you don't really want him running routes for you too often. So Pierre Strong, another name that could potentially grow into that mold. We did see them. There was a play, I think, against the Bills where they put him in the backfield and had him run a seam route, which is something he also did in college.
Yep.
So he has a little bit of experience running less conventional running back routes. And with his speed and athletic ability, you'd love to see him become that genuine receiving back threat. But there's a lot of unknowns there still. So do they have the potential in guys like Pierre Strong, Ty Montgomery, and James Robinson? Yes. But still, there's a lot of unproven, either a lack of a track record or just a guy like Montgomery and even Robinson who are both coming off injuries. So you're not positive what you're going to get from them.
Yeah. So just messing.
My earphone's like a maniac. I have huge ears, and they will fall out if I don't do this. I know it looks ridiculous. People make fun of me all the time. I get weird looks, but as long as I don't have to worry about these things slipping out of my Dumbo ears, I'm good.
I didn't even notice it.
I hope we cut that out and make that a clip to plug the show.
What the hell's wrong with this guy?
That's totally fair, though.
So I love this question because I think a sneaky – we're talking about where's it coming from, right? You know, and looking at the Patriots offense and me being incredibly underwhelmed by a bunch of possession type receivers and a quarterback who's, not a very dynamic playmaker who can get people the ball. But again, I'm just underwhelmed. But I do think there's potential. I want to live in a world where the three top weapons on this team are not anybody we're talking about right now, or not anybody who did anything last year. And one of them is Thornton. One of them is the receiver that they're going to draft, potentially Zay Flowers. And another one is this guy. What are the chances that Marcus Jones spends more time on offense this coming season, more than just a gadget player? And I don't know how realistic this is, but I've seen it suggested, talked about, kind of spoken out there into a possibility, but I don't know how much of it is based on anything real. But it's really hard to deny, like, what we saw in an extremely small sample size last year was unbelievably impressive. And you do wonder, it's like, I don't know, what do you do with this guy? So what do you think is, I know the safe bet is to say probably not, and probably just package plays and a gadget player, but what do you actually think here?
I think he actually did address this at some point in the offseason, saying that defense was still going to be his focus. I think they'll still have a few packages where if they need a spark, maybe they'll kind of keep it in their back pocket, maybe a package play here and there, obviously, that they just kind of mix in. But really, I think his year two role is primarily going to be their main slot guy, which people think that that's what he was last year, but really Miles Bryant was like their only slot cornerback. They put a lot of safeties in the slot as well. But really, it was Marcus Jones on the outside with John Jones and Jack Jones. Depending on whether or not the Patriots want to put John Jones in his natural position in the slot, I think it's probably more likely that they put someone like Marcus there, who, one, has the versatility of being able to play inside, outside if you want to match up, but he's also got safety experience. And there's a ton of packages that the Patriots use where the person in the slot is really just either taking safety duties or is essentially like a hybrid safety type. So to maximize his skill set, I think that's where you're going to see most of his action next year. But yeah, on offense, he's not someone you want really running routes a ton, so it's limited to what you can actually do with him. Although I think his tracking, from what I remember in college, was pretty good downfield for someone who didn't do it a ton. And obviously, as a returner and as someone who has good ball skills on defense, you can see it in flashes there. I feel like I would just be making stuff up at this point. If I
no, it's fine. I'm just saying what you've seen. Could you see a semi-regular role, or do you think that it's, as you said, a package of 10 plays that they have, and they might run 5 of them in a game, and that's about it? Because here's the problem. If you've only got a handful of plays for a guy, you bring him on the field, you might as well put 11 defenders on him. There's not much use you can get out of it. And sure, you can put him as a decoy, and I think that would happen as well. There'd probably be some times where he's out there.
That's what we saw a lot last year. There were times they would just put him in motion.
Look at that guy's on here. What's he going to do? Look at that guy. And then
one of those throwback screens that they love so much. Yeah.
So that's always possible. But I wonder if it's a little bit more than that. I'm going to jump around. We've been doing a lot of offense. I'm going to jump to, this is still offense, but it's not receiver based. Would or should the Patriots pursue Lyle Collins if he's released by the Bengals? Are we talking about him being released by the Bengals?
Yeah, so I think that's what the more recent reports are saying. Obviously, Jonah Williams has been
because that's somebody who's out there. Now we're talking this too.
I guess so. I'm not sure if this is the Bengals trying to see what, gets people going the most, or what the situation is here exactly. Because I think Jonah Williams, I would think he was someone they'd want to keep. So them trying to trade him seemed a little bit odd, considering Lyle Collins is coming off a significant injury. And I think he struggled early in the year and got better before he was injured. But from what I've read, a lot of people are saying that if he were to move, he's a guard. And that he really has just been miscast as a tackle. I think the Cowboys tried to put him at guard at times, but just the way their depth chart shook out, that he ended up playing mostly a tackle. I'm not positive there, though. Yeah. Don't quote me. But he's someone where I'm not sure. Do you really want another tackle, unless like a Peter Skoronski type, where his hand fighting is just so good that it mitigates a bit of the length concerns that he has, and he's just so technically refined? Or someone like Isaiah Wynn had a similar profile and played to his strengths a lot, but for him it was more discipline and consistency. And Skoronski, those aren't even concerns. So I think I would rather, spend the capital to get someone like that, where he's got positional flexibility and tackle may not be his best spot, but that he's going to be a good starter for you, as opposed to someone coming off a huge injury where you don't know. The medicals would have to clear first and foremost. You don't know what he's going to be like once he gets back. And he's someone who already struggled in his role and could be moved, or has maybe just shown that it's not where he fits. So I think he's a solid player, but I don't think he'd be a good fit for the Patriots.
Okay. Let me see here. Jumping around, we're going to throw in this one. Do the Patriots draft Moody? We're talking about the kicker here.
Mm-hmm.
Kicker out of Michigan.
Yep.
Fourth or later. Fourth is early.
Yeah, it's super early.
Early. That doesn't mean the Patriots wouldn't or couldn't, because they have jumped a little bit ahead of where you would think. That's early, but let's move the question around and just say, go get a kicker. Use some draft capital on one. And look, reason the fourth might make sense is because they have so many. And if you figure fifth is where people start to pounce on positions, like once you get to fifth round, it's like, all right, let me get my special teamers here. So you can, but maybe they want to jump ahead if they really like a guy. But do you think that that's a priority here?
I don't think so. I don't think you ever want to get a kicker that early, especially when you have Nick Folk. Like, this isn't a year where you're like, we don't have a kicker on the roster, and if we leave without a good kicker, we're screwed. I think the plan, especially now that they have Corliss Waitman, that is a tough name to remember.
Boy, does Belichick love lefty punters.
And also, we got a black punter in New England. Let's go. I didn't know if I was allowed to tweet that or not, but I was like, hell yeah. It got me a little excited.
Yeah.
But yeah, so he has experience as a placeholder, as a kickoff guy, and as a punter. So I think they've done such a good job of putting themselves in positions where they don't have to completely jump the gun and get a player at a certain position. They can go based on their value chart rather than, again, you don't know what this was with Cole Strange, but people say that they kind of jumped the gun there because he's a guard. Not necessarily true, because Zion Johnson was also taken like in the same area. Oh my God, I just talked myself into a circle. But I don't think that kicker right now is big enough need that you need to take him in the fourth. Fourth rounders are people that, like Dietrich Wise is a fourth rounder. He's someone that you think has a niche role and could contribute to your team, but they need to develop before they get on the field and see regular snaps. Yeah. I think there's so much depth at positions you need in this draft, like tackle, cornerback, receiver, where else? Even linebacker, like they're edge rusher. There's a lot of positions where I think in the fourth round you can get somebody at a really nice value. Jack Jones, another fourth rounder last year. Just to understand the kind of value you can get before you say you want to get a kicker. Unless they were like way at the tail end, like the last pick in the fourth, or they trade, I think it's just going to stick to special teamers in the fifth and the sixth or later.
Is Presley Harvin still in the league?
Presley Harvin? Percy Harvin?
Wasn't that the huge kicker? A huge for Pittsburgh?
I don't know what you're talking about.
I thought there was they had a punter. It was like 260 pounds. All right, let's jump around.
Yeah. I know we're like 6. I know he had a single digit number that looked hilarious because he was a thick boy.
Yeah. All right, let's jump around. We talked about this a little. And we are going to start taking your questions in a minute, so I will solicit those after this. But this is something we kind of hinted at, since the combine, and this comes from Pat's TH 1969. Since the combine, Taylor, I have been repeating my stance for left tackle at 14 and trading up from 46 into the late 30s for a big CB. Now with free agency bringing in more contested catch wide receivers, I might change that draft strategy. Question: do we overdraft at 14 for most dynamic?
Hot to God.
That
one took me a second.
And so we talked a great deal about Flowers at the top of it, and so I know you loaded this thing up here. But yes, there's a lot of love for Zay Flowers among Taylor. But again, in addition to it being potentially Flowers, again, would you be happy with any other? I'll just expand on that since we spent some time on Flowers. Is there any other receiver who you'd be like, yeah, I'd take that guy?
I'm not. I think JSN is a good player. He just doesn't do it for me at 14. If you're sticking at 14, I'd much rather they get one of the tackles if they're still on the board, or maybe trade back if they were to get JSN. But yeah, Flowers is the only. I think he's like receiver 1. I don't think it's particularly close. Although again, I think JSN's a good player, but I think he's like the clear number 2. And then there's guys who are still good, but not in the same tier. But I think Flowers is really the only guy that I would consider there who wasn't a tackle.
What's interesting, I think I think that's the camp you've got JSN guys, you got Flowers guys, and most
Hmm.
people seem to be one or the other, and not really buying some of the other names, Addison or Quentin Johnson, who you'd see a little bit, ahead of these players in most consensus mocks. But I think as you get closer to it, my guess is one of those two are going to be the first receiver taken. I'm not surprised. And again, I really think Flowers at 5'11", he's gone by pick 8. At
Yep.
5'9", people are starting to talk themselves out of him. The problem with Flowers, when you have a top 10 pick, I think you just think, I can't gamble, right?
Yeah.
When is it okay to start gambling or start compromising or start saying, I like this guy a lot, but they're not great? And you start to see that in the teens. Well, he might be more of a right tackle than a left tackle, but is a good, solid football player, so I'll take them.
Yeah.
Like, okay, might not be a lockdown number one corner, but this guy can absolutely play. You start to see that you're changing your thinking a little bit once you get out of that 8, 9, 10 range of the supposed can't misses. So at that point, I'm not saying everyone has warts, but I think that's the only thing keeping Flowers out of sure thing territory.
Yeah, it's just his height.
Yeah.
It's just his height. That's and the thing is with me, usually I think that is a concern, but one with what he brings, the fact that you watch him and you're like, this is a short receiver, this is not a small receiver because he plays big. So again, that's the only real knock for me. Whereas JSN, I just don't think he's explosive enough to justify 14. Like at that pick, sure, the height is a bit of a concern, but he gives you everything else that you want, and it's just aesthetic. You don't put him at X against, someone like a prime Richard Sherman who's got a lot of length and they are good with their hands and they'll probably hit most of the time. A good offensive coordinator is going to put him in motion, and if it's a situation where you think he's going to have to face press man, stack him, get him a free release, and make life easier on him so he can go and be the receiver that he is. And I think that he's only limited to what the offensive coordinator's magic creativity will be. Whereas I think JSN can thrive inside and out, but again, it's just the dynamicism for me. Really good players who can get separation, make great plays, but I don't think it's close between the two.
So if it ends up being like Skoronski or Paris Johnson, or who might be another tackle that goes in that early wave.
So Paris Johnson, Skoronski. Let me actually go on Draft Network real quick.
I know you've got some others who are kind of guard-ish, Torrance being one from Florida, and then Broderick Jones, who I've seen all over the board. I've seen Broderick going top 10. I've seen him falling closer to 20. I don't know if you consider him one of the can't miss guys.
I'm not sure. I'd say it's tough because I think the whole thing with him is that he's not experienced.
Yeah.
But he's a physical freak. And he's at Georgia. Obviously, he's gotten good coaching.
Yeah.
Belichick has a great connection to Georgia. So
let me rephrase the question for you. Yeah. Because let's just take the top two tackles, whoever you have them being, and whether you consider Skoronski a tackle or a guard, and then take the top two corners. Let's call it Gonzalez and who else?
Joey Porter Jr.
Huh?
Joey Porter Jr.
Yeah.
Top two corners.
Yeah. Would you say Joey Porter is definitely number 2?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
I think the only thing with him is that you don't really want him against smaller, quicker receivers, but like what he does against press and like great X guys, it's like you can put him on an island against the isolated receiver. You don't have to worry about him.
So Gonzalez, I think we have a good bit higher than that. But let's say Gonzalez,
he covers everybody.
Of course. So let's say it's Gonzalez, the two tackles, or Zay, and that's your choice. You've got all of them fell.
Christian Gonzalez, like of all those guys, I'm taking Gonzalez because I think he's got the skills to become like top 5 or just like upper echelon type player very, very quickly. And I think he will because he's got the intelligence. He's in a good coaching system. So I think his transition to the league is going to go pretty smoothly. And just because the impact position, like tackle's huge and it's like insurance. It's preventative and you need it, even though it's not sexy. But corner it completely changes your entire defense and how you're allowed to play. So, yeah, just purely on value, I think that Gonzalez is first. And then by that same value metric is where I put Zay before I put the tackles. Although it's so close there, it's like you can either get a generational athlete or just a very rare athlete type at tackle, which I'm not going to be mad at. You want rare athletes on your team because they're tough to match up against. But at the same time, Zay gives you points. A tackle's not giving you points. And you just end up in that debate of which you value more personally, but just because of what Zay brings you in terms of that underneath guy, over the top guy, versatility, great character, works hard, can set the tone in practice. Like obviously there's linemen that I think can do that as well. But when you talk about the fact that he can make plays and get on that
Yep.
highlight reel and change how people would play you, I put it as Gonzalez, Flowers, Porter, and then the tackles, and then Porter. Sorry,
Okay.
behind
All
the
right. So
tackles.
that's where we're at. And I do think, and again, I'm gonna ask once again here. Submit your questions in the chat here. We'll get to as many as we can in the next few minutes, and wrap it up. But I do think, and again, I hate saying this because it's really about getting the players that you want, but it does feel like the value here would be to trade down in the first and then trade back up into the first and see if you can snag 2 guys in the 20s. You know.
I don't know how they do that, but if they leave with Darnell Wright and Zay Flowers, I will
That's
go
what I mean.
wherever
It's like
there's snow,
I
I will take everything off and I'll make angels.
I feel you might get 2 players that you would have been happy just getting one of them at 14 later, potentially, if you can maneuver correctly. So I am curious how it goes there. But again, it depends how things break, and we'll see. We're going around in circles here, but I think we've settled in here, and then we don't have to answer this one long. I believe you've settled in on you would do a second here.
A second and a player who doesn't hurt you if you lose them.
Like
so
Mac
like a
Jones.
receiver or a corner, because I thought you said you were going to be nice to me today. What the hell was that?
No, I only joked because one of the questions you sent us that I didn't get to was, would you do a second in Zappy? I think.
Oh yeah.
Or would you put Zappy for Hopkins because Arizona might need a plug and play quarterback?
Why the hell would they want Zappy? No offense to Bailey Zappy. Why the hell do you want him?
I think Zappies grow on trees, so again, I don't think it's a big deal. But anyway, so you've settled in on a second and a player that doesn't hurt you. Yeah, that's fine. Guys, keep the questions coming. We will wrap it up here. It is a Friday. And my wife's out of town. So crazy shit could happen. No, I'm just gonna watch the Celtics and go to bed. Any other questions for you guys here? Big corner's a luxury. Yeah. I don't know about that.
Big corner is not a luxury, really. There's a lot of so big corner is like small corner. Small corners are usually more valuable because they can play safety, they can play slot, they have versatility as long as they're tough. But people don't like them because you don't want them to get matched up against a big receiver. But then with big corners, you don't like drafting them too early because they're not fast enough or they're not quick enough. Where it's like, don't make him go up against freaking Julian Edelman. Make him go up against Brandon LaFell.
I don't think it's a luxury. I think people can talk themselves into. Last year, the secondary was pretty good, and it should be as good, if not a little bit better, with the rookies developing a little. And we don't know what's going on with the Jack Jones saga there as well. So I think people are thinking, can we get by? If you have several needs, that is a corner at 14 a luxury? Of course.
Okay.
Of course.
There I agree.
And meaning it's great. I agree with you 100%. I don't think people how relaxing it is knowing you've got a lockdown guy. I mean, we just lived through Stephon Gilmore. Was that not just game changing, knowing that it didn't matter who existed over there, that he would just erase them? It's and especially when you're talking about, going against the people that you have in the division. Look what Sauce Gardner did for the Jets in one freaking year. He was a top 3 corner in football. So, I mean, you get somebody who's in anywhere close to that. That's the type of player that changes a lot of what you're able to do. And especially with the pass rush that they had, you can really frustrate some people on defense if you had that kind of personnel. But based on what they had last year, I think everybody is, and this is the general mentality: offense.
Yes.
Yeah. Any more questions, guys? Otherwise, we are going to wrap it up, and that's fine. We've talked plenty. But Taylor, anything left on your mind before we close the show? And if I get any questions to round it out, we'll throw them in there.
Only thing on my mind is lunch. I forgot to eat today.
Yeah.
So, I'm going to eat right after this. But other than that, man, Zay Flowers is on the brain. He had his pro day today, killed it. That's exciting. Just more fuel to the fire for me to pump into people's heads that the Patriots are definitely going to take it.
I'll throw in one more question here from Jose Guzman. Mm-hmm. Who's the best legit free safety in the draft?
I haven't studied safety super closely, honestly. But one player, you mentioned McCourty. Is it Julius Banks? Is that am I getting the name right? Let me see really quick. I know there's a corner in the draft. I'm studying closer soon. But I know there's a guy who basically is just like McCourty, where his whole thing is that he is a corner who could also play safety. Let me see. Julius Brent, Kansas State. That's who I'm talking about.
Okay.
Yes. He's someone I think is really interesting because he gives you that versatility where in certain game plans you can use him in one place, and if you want a true free safety, you can put him there. Although I will say I don't see them going after a pure free safety, at least not early in the draft, because the more I've watched their secondary, people don't understand, like, as much as Devin McCourty was the center field free safety for them, everybody got a lot of reps at that spot. Kyle Duggar had a ton. Adrian Phillips had a ton. So I don't really think they need that guy. I think you just need enough bodies that you can be versatile and kind of switch up based on whatever they're going to do. And
Safety
I think Jalen
feels
Mills
like
gives
a
you
later in the draft sort of thing here. And again, with Jalen Mills moving over, I think that changes things a little bit too. Okay.
Thanks for the clarification, guys.
Yeah, we are going to wrap, and you have Branch out of Alabama as well.
Yeah,
right?
Branch. I haven't watched him yet, so I want to make sure I watch before I say anything.
Yeah.
But I've heard great things.
Yep. Okay, we are going to wrap it up. Thanks again, guys, for hanging out. We'll give you one more shout out to our sponsor, FanDuel, exclusive wagering partner of the CLNS Media Network. Head over to FanDuel.com/Boston if you want to get in on the action. That way they know we sent you. That way you can kind of cash in on this terrific offer of $200 in bonus bets when you place your first $5 bet. All you have to do is deposit $10 and you're off and running. So check that out. Check out TKyles39 on Twitter. Follow all of his analysis. Follow his written work at clnsmedia.com. Subscribe to this channel, loaded with Patriots content. There'll be a lot of draft stuff as we ramp it up between what Taylor does and also the guys over at Patriots Beat, Mike Cadlick and Alex Barth. Greg Bedard on the Greg Bedard Patriots podcast, Andrew Callahan with Pat's Interference, and a host of others. A lot of Patriots coverage coming your way as we kind of get geared up for the tail end of free agency, heading into what's going to be draft ramp-up season, which I know Taylor's really psyched about because he gets to just watch film and gush over guys and tell us why they would be awesome Patriots. So that's what we're going to talk about.
Dream job, baby.
It's great. Anyway, thanks, guys. We'll talk soon.